I think a lot of eyes were on the death metal scene. There were a ton of great bands, and I was able to just go in like a 3-year period and sign everything from Sepultura to Obituary to Deicide, Suffocation, Malevolent Creation, Gorguts, Immolation. At the same time I was doing that, you had Digby over at Earache signing Terrorizer and Morbid Angel, and these records all sold. That, really kind of showed the rest of the music business that, there was money to be made here.
I come blind.
Death metal in Florida was starting to explode, and independent record labels were distributing this extreme music around the globe. And it was Cannibal Corpse who became death metal's biggest and most notorious band.
When we got Cannibal together, all 5 of us were pretty much on the same page from the very beginning. We wanted to be a really dark band that had horror, gore kind of lyrics and, really fast, aggressive death metal. That's what we wanted to do right from the start.
The reason Cannibal Corpse really became death metal's top-selling band is that they had that very immediate shock value. It's not like Morbid Angel where it's like these sort of arcane, satanic, Sumerian, mythological lyrics. It's just like, fucked with a knife. It's like, whoa,
We all thought that there were limitations on it because of the subject matter, because of how aggressive it is, because it's extreme. Even though they've never been on a major label, Cannibal Corpse definitely sold a lot of records and done extremely well for themselves. And certainly the controversies have helped. That you had the election with Bob Dole. He came out in this massive news conference said, Cannibal Corpse are ruining the entire country because of their lyrics.
I want to talk to you tonight about the future of America, about issues of moral importance and matters of social consequence. I'm talking about groups like Cannibal Corpse, Ghetto Boys, and Two Live Crew. About a culture, business that makes money from music, which extols the pleasure of raping, torturing, and mutilating women.
Bob Dole made some comments bemoaning this society that we live in that allows our children to enjoy bands like Cannibal Corpse. And I have no idea what aid of his slipped that in to his speech as a talking point, but I do know that there were 5 dudes in Tampa who were eternally grateful for that.
Bob Dole said, well, we're not trying to censor them, we're just trying to publicly shame them and let people know what they're doing. I said, well, we're not ashamed of what we're doing. We want people to know about what we're doing, so thank you for the free advertisement.
When Cannibal Corpse starts being talked about by U.S. senators, you're just like, whoa, the level of the conversation about this band is just, shot through the ceiling. Like, this is a band that's being talked about on a national political platform as like, one of the great evils in society. This is no longer just an underground phenomenon.
I want to talk about Ace Ventura.
Sure.
How did that all happen?
I'm not 100% sure, but as far as we were told, Jim Carrey actually knew who the band was and liked some of our music. He did let us know that when he first heard the vocals, he's like, well, I just had to laugh. I'd never heard anything like that before. It sounded so crazy. I've met a lot of people that said the first time they heard Cannibal Corpse was by seeing that movie, Ace Ventura, and they said, in fact, that was the first time they'd ever heard death metal. I meet people like that on every tour to this day.
Ace Ventura was another one of those little weird cultural moments that allowed them to elevate their presence and sell more records. In a lot of ways, Cannibal Corpse are kind of America's version of Napalm Death as far as kind of a cultural talking point for what people think crazy heavy metal is and what it's supposed to sound like. And once it starts selling, then everybody kind of swoops in and wants to be involved.
So by the mid-90s, some of the Florida death metal bands were having some mainstream success. But the scene as a whole had kind of become formulaic. And I actually remember losing interest in death metal because it felt stale and overdone. So the question is, what did it take to make extreme metal relevant again? my first film, Metal: A Headbanger's Journey, I explored Norwegian black metal and the controversy surrounding a series of church burnings and murders that happened in the early 90s.
Church burnings and all these things that I support 100%, and it will be done much more in the future.
But this time, I'm focusing on the music. And to get started, I'm gonna go reunite with an old friend.
Yeah, man, we rule. If people don't recognize it, fuck them.
So the last time we met, it became kind of this classic moment.
It was a classic moment, that's for sure. When you gave me that sloppy handshake, I was thinking, who the fuck is this? Look like a fucking nerd. What is this, some kind of school project or whatever? And then you come up with some negative stuff like, black metal is on the way down.
Do you have any comments about that?
Yeah, I have a comment. Fuck you! You know what I mean? It was on my day off, so I had a couple of beers. And now I'm happy to get another chance to start fresh again, so.
Well, we'll get on to the new interview. Going back to your beginnings, what was the sound and the feel of the music that you guys were trying to create?
When we started to play in bands, we started playing Venom covers and Dead Kennedys covers and stuff like that. And then when we started to make our own music, it just became what it became. In the beginning, we started primitive, which was just natural. And the moment we wrote the first 4 songs, we just knew that nobody had ever heard anything like this.
We wanted to continue the primitive sound that bands like Battery and Celtic Frost, because thrash metal had toned down, became more straight. Death metal, on the other hand, became more technical. I saw what Chuck did with Death and I was going, fucking hell, it sucks. Sorry to say. So we wanted to escape the modern metal style, the clicky drums and all that. We were drawn to just playing at even.
Big part of that first wave of black metal is that emphasis on keeping it stripped down, basic, very raw sounding. The look of it, the aesthetic, the imagery was very different than what was going on in death metal. On the one hand, it was much more theatrical because, artists were wearing corpse paint. They were painting their faces white with black around it to resemble actual corpses. But at the same time, they had a kind of lo-fi approach. Like the album covers were literally a shitty photo of a dude in white makeup in the woods that had been photocopied probably 5 times.
The idea of having one band member with paint on the cover in black and white, that became iconic. It's sort of, a lot of people did that afterwards.
When we did makeup and the imagery that came along with it, it had this very dark atmosphere, which definitely helped to create mystery and danger, and that's very different from sunny Florida.
So where was the inspiration for the visuals coming from?
It's all a big mix, but of course the landscape in Norway with the mountains and forests and everything, definitely it influenced us, and it just made everything larger than life, extremely epic.
You've got these guys who look distinctive. They've got crazy medieval weapons. They're in these dramatic woods. These are powerful images. It gets the imagination going. And so I've interviewed Norwegian bands, and they said their fans come up to them and say, do you live in the woods? Are there trolls? How many wolves have you fought? They think it's Lord of the fucking Rings. And for a lot of the Norwegians, some of them play up to it.
The roots of Norwegian black metal lay in reclaiming extreme metal's primitive sound and imagery. But it didn't stay primitive for long, and it was Norway's Dimmu Borgir who turned black metal into a full-on spectacle.
The battle raged on and on, fueled by the venom of hatred for man. Consistently without the eyes to see, for those who revel in silver.
We knew that if we're going to do something special, we're going to have to follow our vision and not look at what other people necessarily want you to do like a so-called written black metal rule or something like that. Our sound at the time was pretty fresh with the so-called old school black metal look, you know, but the music was more modern, using a lot of keyboards and synthesizers, which at the time was not looked upon as something that was true or whatever. We already had the typical guitars, bass and drums, but we were always subconsciously looking for that wall of sound, you know, and not that keyboards make that wall of sound, but it definitely makes for a great atmosphere, and that's what we in Dimmu always been all about, is the atmosphere, you know.
Dimmu Borgir turned black metal into almost opera, even using whole orchestras at the time to create this big music, this very theatrical, almost camp kind of sound. They are a little ridiculous, but they're also annoyingly catchy.
When we went on stage, we wanted to have a full package, like a complete thing, not just the music. That's how we gained so much of a bigger fan base and kind of paved the way for a lot of other bands too, and opened up borders, so to speak.
Dimmu Borgir broadened the horizons of black metal, and they became Norway's biggest black metal band. But meanwhile, England's Cradle of Filth were shattering the conventions of the genre.
What do you think has set you apart from what people typically think as the black metal sound or look?
I didn't just go straight for the jugular with the whole satanic thing. The lyricism sort of explored more gothic terrain, more poetry, and people like Byron and Polidori and Lovecraft and Clive Barker, sort of mythology as well, that derived from, I suppose, the British aesthetic.
Danny is unquestionably the heart and brain of Cradle, because he brings in his own passion for archaic poetry, for hammer horror films, for gothic imagery. He's got a great eye for visuals that work, visuals that appeal.
Cradle of Filth had that sort of accessibility on that level where a goth chick who otherwise listens to like Marilyn Manson can appreciate a Cradle of Filth, whereas, you know, a Dark Throne just sounds like fucking, you know, like a jet engine to her, you know. Cradle of Filth has that sort of palatability by a more mainstream audience.
You know, I dare anybody when they say they start a band and they don't imagine themselves up on a big stage, you know, playing to a lot of people. When Cradle of Filth was founded, that's how we pictured ourselves.